I would rather trust you than simply continue to spoil from within.
She is one of my dear daughters. But the rotting sickness erodes one's memory. I doubt that she remembers the first thing about me.
Alright, welcome back to Honored Madmen. We've got a good one for you guys today, if a bit ranty. So when I first started making videos, I covered the Servants of Rot, Millicent, Gowry, the Pests quite a bit. In fact, the whole reason I have a YouTube channel is because that Servants of Rot video did so good. It's almost like this corner of the lore has a sort of sentimental value for me. But that being said, I do know that my previous coverage has been, at first scatterbrained, kind of all over the place. So I figured I should make a video that kind of clarifies and sort of cleans up some of my past theories regarding the religion of Rot, as it were. Although I'm mainly going to be focusing on the relationship between Gowry, the Sage of Celia, and his quote-unquote daughter Millicent and what his plans were for her. Especially after watching Zully the Witch's great video on the topic. Alright, so let's get right into it. Millicent is closely associated with Malenia, a demigod, and Empyrean, the child of Marika and Radagon, the two godlike figures in the current cycle. And possibly because both of her parents are technically the same person, she was born with the bud of an ancient rot god inside her. She was born the vessel for this eldritch old dead god that was sealed away a millennia ago by a blind swordsman garbed in blue and wielding a flowing sword. Curiously enough, this mysterious swordsman would also possibly be a mentor of sorts for Malenia, but that's a whole other story. So we meet Millicent, a one-armed woman in a church slowly dying of her rot affliction. Or alternatively, you've already met her in the swamps where she invaded you using all these cool attacks. Or perhaps you met the Celian sage with the T-Rex dog named Gowry who directed you to Millicent. Now, side note about Gowry, he's a sage of Celia. Celia was a former Nox town. I say former because there's really only 2 Nox left in it. But it became a famous town of sorcery. It's where Radon learned how to hold back the stars. It was also the hometown of a founding level sorcerer of the Ray Lucarian Academy, Lusat. One of the most powerful known sorcerers that's still kicking around, even though he's mostly rock nowadays. Anyway though, Gowry is a Celian sage, or a former one rather, and these Celian sages, well, they can get a bit obsessed. Take Gowry's former colleague and current necromancer, Gowrys, who after losing his family to presumably unknown causes, I'd imagine though the scarlet nuking of Caelid probably had something to do with it, or maybe it happened after or before those events. Either way, Gowrys lost his family and became obsessed. He poured all of his grief and sorrow into his magical research in a vain attempt to resurrect them, inadvertently rediscovering the art of summoning Rancor in the process. Now, Rancor were like vengeful spirits that could be summoned through an old form of death magic from a previous cycle back when the death birds were held in a higher regard. They're basically like these icy blue flame skulls that chase the people that they're casted at. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. Gowrys was obsessed with bringing his family back at any cost, and Gowry is obsessed with the Scarlet Rot. Having had his moment of clarity the day Malenia bloomed and changed the face of Caelid as a whole. After that, the guy had a singular purpose. It seems that Malenia's sudden departure from this rotten wonderland that she just created profoundly impacted Gowry. He saw himself, as well as all these beings that she had created, as having been abandoned by the Empyrean demigod, so he sought to give his people a new figure to follow, one more worthy of the Scarlet Rot in his eyes. He first began organizing the Pests, who actually weren't that bad. They were a lot like the Beastmen in that they possessed a knack for their craftsmanship. They came in a few different shapes and sizes. The most notable of them is the Kindred of Rot, the Centipede Men, whose grotesque yet imposing and intimidating stature made them perfect guards for the various subterranean dwellings they call home. Gowry also seems to have taught the Kindred the value of glintstone mining, because we can see the Kindred of Rot, both lesser and greater, overseeing a mining operation in a cave near the swamp. Presumably the glintstones mined were used to make those staffs for the Servants of Rot, the mushroom-headed guys. Perhaps the glintstones undergo some sort of process to make them green and poisonous, or perhaps they're just products of their new environment, a toxic swamp. The Servants of Rot in particular appear to have originally just been men who were mutated by the Scarlet Rot Blast and turned them into mushroom men, who seem to serve as shamans, sorcerers, and healers in the ranks of the Pests. And again, they were a loathsome bunch, but they are far from the worst thing you can encounter in Elden Ring. Plus, they do seem hardworking, I gotta give them that. And yeah, they look all fucked off and are associated with poison and rot. They're pitiable, if nothing else, at least for someone like you or me, but not Gowry though. Gowry saw true beauty in the Pests and the Scarlet Swamp itself, and he really did resolve to give them a goddess worthy of them. And it's not so much that Gowry wants to completely replace Millennia, it's just that he basically wants to create a new vehicle for the Rot God to carry out its unfathomable designs for the lands between. Since Millennia proved herself to be a less than agreeable vessel, I think it's safe to say that these factors are what compelled Gowry to act in the ways that he did. In Millicent's case, he knew that he would need to deceive her in order to facilitate this ascendance he was planning. Millennia herself was ultimately irrelevant to Gowry at this point, as there was currently a tarnish running around killing all the demigods. He figured that would sort itself out. And if she ever was eventually killed, Gowry would know, because she would ascend to a higher state of being, and this ascension could also mean the transcendence of the Swamp Sisters, or at the very least one of them, in this case the one with the most potential. Shit, his little experiment with Millicent isn't even the first time he's done that to try and create a Scarlet Valkyrie. One of them even made it as far as Millennia's boss fight before presumably being killed by her sisters or someone else that she trusted, and essentially being put in hibernation until Millennia bloomed that third time and ascended. But anyway, he claims to have raised Millicent and her sisters since they were babies that he found in the Ionian swamp, and has presumably spent his life nurturing their growths and sort of shaping them to be these worthy candidates of Millennia. And of the 5 or 6 sisters, there's really only one that he truly believed in, Millicent. It's not hard to see why. She was essentially the second coming of Millennia. A spitting image that embodied all of Millennia's characteristics, her skill with the sword, her association with the rot, her red hair, she even lost the same arm. And just as much as Millicent embodies all of these characteristics of Millennia, she also embodies the rot itself, which since birth had always defined Millennia. Just as Millicent herself was born of the newly formed Scarlet Rot Swamp, and it was a part of her, just as she was born a part of an Empyrean warrior goddess, and this is essentially what marked her as the prime candidate for Gowry's goals. And later on we find evidence that this wasn't even the first time all of this happened. She wasn't even the first to make it that far. She truly is just a cruel victim of fate. Either way though, you're familiar with her, and after meeting Sage Gowry, he sends you to help her out a little bit. He has you acquire a gold needle that once belonged to Millennia and give it to Millicent so that she can stave off her rot infection. And after she's given the needle, it's pretty much like night and day. She looks completely different, a lot more healthy. She's still minus one arm, but she looks a lot better now with the needle than she did without it. Anyway though, this sort of is the beginning of a friendship between Millicent and the player character. And after that, she sort of sets off on a journey to retrace Millennia's steps from Caelid all the way back to the Hallowed Tree, but she needs some help along the way. And she kind of becomes like this game's version of Lucatil or Solaire as this indirect traveling companion and friend. But I'm getting ahead of myself already. So Gowry claims he found Millicent and her sisters, of which there are 4, as babies in the swamp after Millennia's bloom, which had a life-changing effect on Gowry, as after he witnessed such a thing, he dedicated his life to the Scarlet Goddess. So Zoli's video brilliantly posits that perhaps these babies were sprouted from the swamp itself, since the rot is part of Millennia, or the outer god that she's housing. And since Millennia herself has fucked off back to the Hallowed Tree, seemingly abandoning all of her new insectoid followers that were created following her battle with Radon. It's sort of like that episode of Billy and Mandy where Billy is like the first thing this giant monstrous spider sees, so the spider views him as his dad, but Billy himself wants nothing to do with the spider and is constantly trying to run away from him, escape him, or even kill him. This is a lot like what Millennia's situation was with the rot, I think, as she wanted absolutely nothing to do with the bug-looking monsters. Now, I've always kind of thought that Millennia losing her limbs to rot was a subtle way of the outer god within her quietly shedding off bits of Millennia's own personality and perhaps her humanity and soul. A year ago, I'd probably claim that they were likely grown from whatever was left of Millennia's severed limbs, via weird rot magic. But now I tend to believe that, like Zoli's video claims, that these babies were produced by the Scarlet Rot, which is a part of Millennia. But I think that their existence was only possible because Millennia shed so much of herself when she went and bloomed against Radon in that fight. Those parts of her had effectively rotted away and been reborn as something new, something that Gowry could use to replace Millennia and give his people the god that he believed they deserved. And out of all these sisters, Millicent was the most like her quote-unquote mother, or at least the one Gowry was rooting for. You can tell by how happy he is when he hears about how you got her a prosthetic arm. He's probably thinking, holy shit, this is going way better than I expected. It certainly is a good thing that there was a young lordling who was unhealthily obsessed with Millennia to the point where he kept several of her spare arms and legs around his castle. It didn't stop there. He also had portraits of her, statues of her and her kid brother, some other strange hooded statues that I can't quite place right now. The guy had it all. He basically brought new meaning to the word obsessed in the lands between, at least when it came to specifically being obsessed with obscure religious figures. Dude's definitely Millennia's biggest fan. He even invited some of her clean rot knights to rest and recuperate in his mansion, who were presumably absolutely useless when a fallen warrior monk staged a prison riot and took over the castle. But apparently this kind of behavior ran in the family, as the stewards of the shaded castle come from a long line of old rot religion followers. A very old faith from way back in the day of the lands between that was currently making a return. And who knows, maybe if you followed an old religion and your god suddenly returned looking like the chick from Heavenly Sword, maybe you'd be obsessed too. I did a whole video on him. It's alright. I don't actually think he's the Swamp Sister's father. I just thought it would be a funny thumbnail. Anyway, so when the player first walks through Gowry's door, the old sage sees an opportunity. He can use you to make Millicent's value increase, as well as help speed his plans along, as they've currently been stalled by Millicent's affliction, intensifying to the point where she's just lost an arm. He keeps her protected, heavily guarded by a garrison of rot kindred and Celian ball magic, and while his other quote-unquote daughters were currently being stalled by their own lack of potential and skill, this wouldn't last. He knew that if he wanted his plans for Millicent to come to any form of fruition, that he would need some help. So he sends the player into the Crimson Swamp, promising them all the secrets of Celia in return, and all they have to do is retrieve the needle, a golden needle that once belonged to Millennia herself. It's what she used to stave off her rot affliction, and it's also apparently something she shedded when she went nuclear in Caelid. Currently, the ring in question is in possession of a veteran storm commander located in the very heart of the swamp proper. Now this guy, he's no slouch. He's got the spirits of his fallen soldiers to back him up, and you can have the assistance of one of Millicent's sisters when you fight him. Anyway, though, after you get it, you find out that the ring is actually broken now. So you take it back to Gowry, and he promises to fix it up so you can take it to Millicent and sort of help her on her way. Now, side note, Gowry's ability to repair the needle implies some sort of familiarity with Miquella's inventions, or at the very least, a familiarity with unalloyed gold as a whole, but it is interesting that he was able to fix it given its divine functions. I mean, it's the only thing that can bail you out of the frenzy ending if you happen to get stuck on that trajectory. But anyway, you deliver the needle to Millicent and she begins her grand adventure. Now, it does sort of seem like Millicent's journey of self-discovery was also a part of Gowry's plan, or at the very least he expected it and knew where it would lead her. He also avoids her when she tries to visit him, probably because he thinks it might cause her to remember things that may stop her from going on her little odyssey. But go she does. And along the way, she encounters the player character several times, their journeys almost coincidentally running parallel with one another, becoming trusted friends and battle companions along the way, having fought god killers that wear the skin of their fallen quarry, the forces of death itself in the form of those elite black gargoyles of Malekith, whose weapons imbued with destined death. They overcame every odd that was thrown their way, until they finally reached the end of their journey, the Halig Tree, where they had what the hip-hop duo Gangstar would call a moment of truth. And everything the two of them overcame, it all leads up to this meeting. This fateful confrontation in the depths of the Halig Tree's toxic root system, not far from where the Empyrean Harpy herself currently rested, which, I gotta say, in many ways Millennia can be blamed for everything that happened to Millicent. It was because of her that Millicent never had a chance, to be her own person. So it all comes down to this: what do? Do you betray your friend and turn them into a vessel for some entity to be worshipped by bugs? Or do you decide to give her a fighting chance and allow her to exist as her own person, even if she chooses to die because she knows that Gowry and the Pests will never stop trying to make her into a new vessel? Well, Gowry is banking on you choosing the former. In fact, throughout his entire questline, he's trying to subtly get you drinking the servants of rot Kool-Aid, so to speak. In fact, it actually seems like he's sort of hoping that you will be his insurance that Millicent's sisters are successful in striking her down. It's essentially the one variable that could either guarantee his plan's success or its failure. He essentially put all his money on Millicent, but that didn't mean that the other sisters didn't have a part to play. Even if it was darker, less fun, and a lot less glamorous, it was rewarding as they were helping bring their god back into the world, and at least they would get to live if everything went according to Gowry's plan. That being said though, he definitely valued Millicent far more than the others, but I don't think he cared about any of them in the parental kind of way like he acts, or that he would have us believe. They all hold value to him, but the individual amounts just vary. As unlike Millicent's sisters, Gowry is giving Millicent a helping hand in her quest. Shit, we see that Pollyanna is off trying to get the needle for herself, but she needs help from a player character, and she don't even get the fucking needle. And yeah, I used to think that Gowry possibly grew these women from the severed limbs of Millennia, although as it seems from the numerous cutscenes there are of her fight with Radahn, her amputations clearly predate the sisters' existence by quite a while. So I think while she was losing these bits of her actual physical person, she was also losing bits of her mind. Bits of what made her, as Millicent will later put it, as after getting Millicent one of Millennia's spare prosthetics and journeying with her all across the map, she feels this strange compulsion to return to Millennia, something that she'd sacrificed in her epic battle with Radahn. She's effectively a piece of the original Millennia that is now mostly gone and taken over by this outer god of rot that happened to be born inside of her because she happened to be the product of two gods. I guess being an Empyrean doesn't just mark you for being the next god, it also marks you as a influenceable target by all the other outer gods that are vying for control of the lands between. Whether it's a blood god, a moon god, or a rot god, it doesn't matter. It's going to take a stab at trying to influence one of the current Empyreans. That's just the nature of things. And as we all know, this quest has two ways of playing out. And I know this character in quest deserves a video dedicated to it, but this is not that video. That'll be a later date when the DLC comes out. Anyway, at the very end of Millennia's road, you're faced with a choice. You can assist her in fighting off all of her sisters, something that Gowry or whatever inhabiting spirit is currently using him as a vehicle wouldn't want you to do. In fact, he blatantly instructs you to do the opposite, to assist Millicent's sisters in slaughtering her, allowing her to eventually be reborn as a Scarlet Valkyrie, presumably effectively replacing Millennia since she's the unwilling god who wants nothing to do with Gowry or any of the other pests. In many ways, he's just trying to bring his people the god they deserve. However, Millicent was probably the closest friend that my player character had in the end, so he couldn't bring himself to kill her. But that's the other option. You can help her fight off all of her sisters, and afterwards you have one final conversation with her, where she realizes everything. She seems to fully understand what was planned for her here in this place, possibly even remembering Gowry. Which is why I think he was curiously absent from his cabin the one time she showed up to look for him. I think he didn't want his face to bring back any unpleasant memories for Millicent. Not that he was mean, but that he didn't really view her as what she was. He viewed her as a means to an end to restore a god for all of his people, basically allowing her to be a vessel for some otherworldly, outer godly spirit. And Millicent, well, she chooses to die on her own terms as herself. She pulls the needle out and slowly dies, while thanking the player for allowing her to live as herself, if however briefly it was. And of course, if you just betray her and kill her, there is a flower bud in her place similar to the one that appears after you kill Millennia. So in theory, if you do kill Millennia right after you do Millicent's quest, perhaps the new vessel or whatever you want to call it is now Millicent. And presumably at some point she's supposed to rise as this mythical Scarlet Valkyrie. When it comes to Gowry, he ultimately viewed Millicent as a tool, a means to an end. The only time he shows any emotion at all is when he feels his plans for her are threatened. Sure, you could argue that he's crying before Millicent has her fight with her sisters, but I believe he's weeping tears of joy. I mean, for him, his plan is just about to come together. And just for an added layer of insurance, he even asks you, the player, to assist in killing her because that betrayal will be one most sweet. He knows that those circumstances will get him the best possible outcome. And the only time we see the lodge entity known as Gowry sad is Millicent pulls the needle out and chooses to die on her own terms, abandoning him and his pesticide brethren in the same way Millennia did. And if that weren't enough, in this scenario, she also, with the help of the protagonist, vanquished all of the other swamp sisters, so Gowry's back to square one. No potential buds. He's certainly not crying because of losing Millicent as a person. He's devastated over losing what she possessed. That sense of will or self that I mentioned earlier. Ironically, it's probably that same sense of will that led to her pulling the needle out in the first place. No, Gowry is sad because all of his scheming has failed. His plans will have been blown completely in his face. The bud he believed in most killed all the other potential candidates he had for rot godhood to succeed Millennia. There wasn't even anything left of his efforts that he could salvage. And all he can do is weep about it, really. There's not much else. I mean, he can start from scratch again, but he has to find some more babies or perhaps grow some more. Who knows? Or maybe he'll give up on being the Pope of the Servants of Rot. I mean, not one, but two potential goddesses have abandoned him and his followers, so maybe they should just take the hint. And honestly, you shouldn't really feel bad for Gowry either. This guy raised these girls together in the swamp as sisters, making them form this pseudo-familial bond, knowing full well that when the time came, he was going to have the one who had the most potential be slaughtered by her sisters so she could experience that true betrayal to seemingly make this ritual of succession work. I mean, he raised them up knowing that he was going to make them kill each other when they were adults, all because he was bitter that his god, or goddess, Millennia, had left him. And not only that, she did also leave him with a bunch of weird insect creatures to have to shepherd under his banner and whatnot. I know some pests existed before Millennia's nuking of Caelid, but I'm almost certain her actions led to the births of several new ones as well that Gowry did in fact have to take care of. Beings that Gowry also felt had been abandoned by Millennia when by rights that was her responsibility. At least that's how he saw it. Still though, Gowry played a high-risk, high-reward game and lost. That was always a possibility, especially when you're playing with concepts like outer gods and demigods and rituals of ascension and the like. Millicent herself is unclear on the exact nature of her connection to Millennia. She's not sure if she's a daughter, a relative, a distant offshoot. She's not sure, and if she ever was, it's been obscured to her by the rot disease. I wouldn't be surprised if Gowry himself told the sisters some fabricated, exaggerated version of their origin, and by extension their connection to the goddess of rot herself, but that Millicent's affliction from the rot was just so severe that she forgot a great many of things. And we follow her on that quest of, finding out who she was and finding out as much as she can about the only relative she's known to have besides the sisters, Millennia. But at the end of the day, Millicent is sort of just a cruel victim of fate and circumstance. I mean, she didn't ask to be born of a residual piece of Millennia's psyche, specifically her will, perhaps. Which again is probably why Gowry was betting on her the most out of the other sisters. They probably represented weaker aspects of Millennia's personality. But yeah, there's really no way this questline has a happy ending for Millicent. In the end, all we can really do is allow her the quiet dignity of a death on her own terms, by letting her remove the golden needle and finally letting the rot reclaim her. Or conversely, if you betrayed Millicent, then you can head on back to Gowry's shack and find him now quote-unquote dead. Evidently he fulfilled whatever role or purpose he had been given by the rot gods, and could now die knowing his work was complete. Perhaps the god rewarded him with some sort of uplifting for his work. Or Gowry was never really Gowry in the first place. He was just inhabited by some spirit of the rot god. Possessed, if you will. I think at one point I'll do like a really long video about the Servants of Rot and just Caelid as a whole and all of it. But I originally just wanted this one to be like a neat little video where I tidied up some of my old rot theories. But by the look of how long I've been going for, this one turned into another ramble. If I repeated myself at all, you have my deepest apologies. I hate when I do that. But as always, I hope you guys found the video to be amusing and informative. If I got anything wrong, please let me know in the comments. And if you like the video, please like it. If you dislike it, please dislike it. And if you like hearing me ramble on, usually for longer amounts of time than this, then please consider subscribing. We've got a lot of good stuff coming, namely this Aldia video that I can't seem to proof listen to enough times before I'm satisfied with it. I'm just kidding, it's almost done. But yeah, at the risk of rambling more, here's our outro, shall we? So yeah, I tried not to just rehash everything that Zoli said since they had such a great way of summarizing everything. Because what can I say, I was inspired. I've been wanting to do some kind of little rant video like this, and I guess seeing Zoli's video was the thing that lit a fire under my ass to get me back to work on a random short video. Since I knew this daunting Aldia task I've been working on is it's almost done. I'm just really trying to make sure I don't forget anything on this, because he's got his hands over just about everything in Dark Souls 2, so we got to be really extensive. Anyway, I will be seeing you guys real soon with the aforementioned Aldia video, and after that we got some really great stuff. I got a couple Zelda topics I've been sitting on with basically finished video, a whole bunch of stuff. I always ramble at the end of these videos, but as always, I hope you guys have a good one, and I will see you next time.
The girl, Millicent, she is a bird. Green and undeveloped, waiting to flower into magnificence. What a wondrous day that will be. In truth, before her, I'd never seen a bud of such superior quality. She might very well outshine her sisters.